Dave, welcome back. I cannot believe it is Wednesday and you're back with us.
Wait, is it Wednesday already? I tell you, this stuff blows me away.
Well, I'm just glad you made it. Some days I sit here, Dave, and I cross my fingers hoping that everything aligns up and you'll be able to make it on time.
Yeah, it's always tough when you're the one putting it together because until that screen pops up and you see someone's face, you're like, are they coming? Are they coming? I know we've dealt with that many times on our 4 hour presentations when got someone else that's supposed to teach 2.5 hours and you're going, I hope they show up. We're going to have a short class today if they don't.
Definitely true. The live events always are a little nerve wracking as you're waiting for that time. But hey, everything works out. We're here. We are ready to talk about retirement. But before we do, Dave, tell me how the week's going.
Yeah, everything's good. Yeah, they're finally getting some of our house put back together. We at least got our patio now that we can use. They're tearing apart our bathroom, my son's bathroom, laying new carpet from water damage that happened. So nowhere close to being done, but all's good. Boys are off at church camp. We're here with the little ones and can't complain.
That's awesome. And we're grateful that you're here. And we're also grateful for those who have joined us live and on replay. Thank you for being here. And we encourage you to submit your retirement questions. What we do every week is we pull all the questions that have come in through various webinars, through our websites, through DM or PM. They all come in through the social areas as well, or the ones we missed from the weeks before. We take those, we put them in, and we throw all those to Dave and try to get Dave's input on a lot of these questions coming in. And Dave, what's the hot topic right now before we start diving into some of these questions?
It's Elvis. It's Elvis because that's where I went over the weekend. I got to go see my cousin over there at Graceland. The new show's out. Again, for those of you that don't know, ninth cousin. Now, I don't know how I didn't get into the will not getting part of the profits that are being made right now, but finally got talked into going over there by some business partners we have, the Weimers, if you know them at all, and had a good time. Very interesting experience. Don't think I'm going back anytime soon, but was able to enjoy the weekend.
Did you at least get to see the Jungle Room, Dave?
I did. Yeah, it was all I could do to not just jump over the rope and go have a sit down there and watch one of those old televisions.
Well, I'm glad you got to have fun. I'm glad you got to learn more about Elvis, your ninth cousin. That's fantastic. And learning
You
about.
know, the crazy thing is, and we talk about it in various settings that, people do all the time, but you go through that house, and again, obviously a beautiful home, but man, you look at people today that almost a poor segment of the population lives better to some extent than they did back in those periods of time. I mean, especially from a media and a television and entertainment standpoint. I mean, the ability to buy a TV for $100 that does 10 times what those old televisions did. And even just furniture so much nicer and more comfortable than some of those old couches and stuff. But anyway, very interesting experience.
Dave, somebody I do wish I was related to was Gary. Gary's saying a good morning out of San Francisco Bay Area.
So good to have you back again, Gary. It's been a while since we've been together. Always nice to have you here, and looking forward to one day. One day we are going to get to San Francisco. I just don't know when it's going to be.
Gary, we're always grateful that you join us on our show. And again, if you have questions, if you are joining live, go ahead and get those questions put in the chat there, either through Facebook or YouTube, since we're live on both, and we'll do our best to get those answered. All right, Dave, I teased a lot of the different questions we have today, but I'm going to pull up our first one here if you're ready to get started.
Sounds good.
All right, this is from Alice, and Alice is saying, how many rising interest rates impact my retirement plan?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on how your plan is structured. Now, if you're someone who's looking to go into retirement with a bunch of debt and are going to need consistent debt, you're going to be paying a lot more money for that debt than you otherwise would be. But if you're someone who's investing money into especially annuity products, maybe other interest-based products that are driven by interest rates, it's going to allow your planning to produce better results. So again, it really depends on what side of the coin you're on and what you've got in place already. But rising interest rates can actually be extremely good for those in retirement because it's allowing you to get much higher interest rates. We go back pre-2008. Think of the number of retirees that had money in trust deeds back at the time, paying 12% consistently. Some of them had 18% second trust deeds. Pretty good rate of return. If every year you're getting just 12% income, getting thrown off on a regular basis. Well, everything drops in 2008. Interest rates now are off the table. Probably be lucky to get a real estate investment trust that would pay you 5 or 6% out there. And that'd be a good one.
Dave, it's so funny that I read these questions about 100 times and I can't read them when I'm on here. So we'll
Well,
forgive me when I slaughter through half of these.
it was a long question. It did have 9 words in there, so I could realize it can be tough.
Yeah. Some days I feel like I'm on and some days I'm just not. But with that, Dave, I do want to ask about these, the interest rates, because a lot of times when we see the interest rates, when everything changes, people start to react too quickly. And I want to get your advice on that.
Yeah, they do, and it's a little bit of a challenge out there right now. And again, there are going to be impacts. I mean, there are other things that obviously interest rates can create havoc on from a retirement side, like right now. Say mortgage applications are at a 40-year low. I mean, that's kind of hard to believe when you think of the number of loans that were given prior to 2008. I mean, there
Yeah.
were a lot of people getting loans before everything crashed. You had a lot of money that was going out there and saying, hey, it's at a 40-year low. So again, you got this situation that could crash a real estate market, the stock market's obviously gone way down. There's a group of us that believe there's another big down tip that we're going to have within the next year that's going to happen. So yeah, you're right. I mean, as they get moving on these things, it can lead, the fear can lead to really bigger consequences than we maybe necessarily need to have.
I guess, Dave, I'm just not a big fan of large changes in overall retirement planning strategies, because they do this because in anticipation of the changes of these interest rates, and they just try to hurry and adjust over and over. But what you always preach is make sure that you're getting everything set correctly instead of always trying to move every single time the market does.
Yeah, and it's really all about income too. Again, right now, I mean, there are many people that are panicking. I know even back in 2020, when we had the 20% drop, number of people called, took all their money out of the stock market, and then missed a huge upside over the last few years. Got many people doing the same. But again, if you're in an income environment, again, when you're sitting there during your working years and you're just looking at your paycheck, if you're still getting, your $5,000, $10,000, whatever it may be, $2,000 every month, hey, life's the same. Okay, yeah, the market went down. Now inflation's killing me. Yeah, if I'm on a set paycheck, that's creating its impact, and I got to figure it out. But the market really becomes irrelevant to you during that period of time, and it can be the same in retirement. But if you've got the income you need, okay, we don't like the market dropping. We'd prefer that it stayed up, but I can wait it out. It's okay. 5 years, it'll come back. I'll be in a good position. I'll be able to take my profits off the table. But for now, I got my income. That's okay. I can still go to the movies, go shopping, travel, whatever it is I want to do.
And Dave, I appreciate that. And I've got the question coming in from Gary. He's talking about I bonds. And so we'll see if you could help give some clarification. The I bond interest rates adjust every 6 months in April and October. Currently, this government savings bond I bond interest rate is 9.625%. What happens to the rate of return if the inflation rate decreases in the future to a lower rate? Do you recommend the purchase of I bonds?
Yeah, I do recommend them, Gary. I do own them right now. It's something that I've invested in, but they will go down. I mean, you look at I bonds. I mean, they've been around for a long period of time, but nobody talked about them because inflation was never high enough, and other assets were performing so well that it made absolutely no sense to put money into these I bonds, because they weren't going to give you the investment return that you were looking for. But you're right. Now you look at it and say, hey, almost 10% in a guaranteed environment. Yeah, if I could put $1 million in there, wouldn't be a bad idea to do so if you're getting a guaranteed 10% in this environment. But unfortunately, we can't do that. It's $10,000 per year. Now, I did learn the other day, I didn't realize this. You can stack those, meaning if you invest this year and then next year, but inflation's not going to be here that long. I mean, the reality of it, it's going to be a short-term thing. And as Gary's mentioning, they're not saying, hey, we're locking you in for a 30-year 10% rate of return. You're a 1 or 2 year hit. So as you look at it, got to realize that with many of the things we do, we are going to have to adjust and make changes to.
And Dave, his follow up on here I put on early is who should not consider buying I bonds?
I really don't know of anyone, I guess, unless they just have no money. I mean, if you're in a position where you don't have an emergency fund, again, you're locking this money up inside of here. I don't know of anyone that wouldn't consider it for a portion of their retirement assets.
Yeah, I really like that because again, if we're just looking at portions, I really agree with that, Dave. And I
And it's
appreciate.
easy to set up, folks. I mean, again, we're not talking, hours of going through financial advisors and planning. I think it took me probably all of 5, 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to get everything set up, get my account linked, have the money pulled out, and you're invested.
Dave, I think this next question was pretty controversial for a while, but now I think everybody's saying the same thing you are: is how likely is it that our taxes will increase during retirement?
Well, they're going to for sure. I mean, January 1st, 2026, we know that they're going to go up to what they were in 2017. But again, 2030, how do you pay modern? So our options were we could cut spending, which we're not doing. There's nowhere out there. Everything that's being proposed now is to increase spending. We could print more money, which we tried to do. We dropped $6 trillion into the economy and now have this outrageous inflation rate that is proving why modern monetary theory does not work, because it has to be in a low inflationary environment, but it creates inflation. So it's like, okay, our printing of money just created the problem that causes it not to work. Or we have to increase taxes. So you look at the future and you say, and even now, again, folks, if you look at all the things that you're thinking you want right now, that the government's saying, hey, let's just tax all the rich, and none of us are in that area, so we're saying, hey, rich people, go ahead and take all that burden. We're happy to give you all the responsibility. Well, they tap the rich out. So what happens the next time that you need something that we really should be having? They got to come to the middle class.
Mhm.
And the middle class is going to have to pay that because the poor have nothing to give. So, folks, again, if you're voting to just have the rich cover things that you're saying, I care less if we have it, it's not me paying for it, who cares? Yeah, what we want them to be paying for is legitimate things that can help society, that can help us, and that at some point, hopefully, our rates won't go any higher than they have to.
And Dave, a follow-up question I didn't get put on here from Sue is, how do we avoid paying taxes?
Yeah, how do you avoid it? Is you've got to structure your retirement to where it is designed to allow that not to happen, which means getting most of your money into the tax-free bucket, as we refer to it. Going to require you to invest in Roth accounts, whether it be an IRA, 401k. Going to require you to invest potentially into life insurance products. Going to require you to get your tax-deferred account down so you can use your standard deduction and help offset any potential taxes and not pay tax on Social Security. So it's something that can be done by almost everyone. I guess everyone could do it unless you've got a pension that's out there that's guaranteed that you can't turn off. Everyone could do it. It's just, you got to look at the cost benefit. Most people, there is one, but some people are in a situation where it's just not cost beneficial to move all of that money immediately.
And Dave, it's funny because as we talk about different types of income, especially we look at Social Security, I ran across a title that was on one of the articles that said, you probably won't pay any taxes in retirement if Social Security benefits are your only source of income. And that was just a lead in. So people are looking at this by saying, I'm not going to have to pay anything on Social Security. But I think a lot of times people are misinformed with bad information out there. And I think it's really important piece that we discuss and talk about.
And you're exactly right. And there was a new article come out just the other day that I read on the flip side of that was saying, hey, look, folks, we're looking at a 10, almost a probably 9 to 10% increase in Social Security this next year, maybe higher than that. Could be as high as 11%. What you look at it from an overall getting money side out of the system, you're saying, hey, that's great. All of a sudden my paycheck went up from $1,000 to $1,100 if I'm in retirement. That's awesome. But what they warned there is once that happens, we go from 40% of us paying tax on our Social Security benefits to where now it's going to be maybe 50%, maybe even 55% of retirees are going to be paying some tax on their Social Security benefit. So if you look back, and again, to realize that the problem that this is creating, because these thresholds are not being inflation adjusted, I go back, and you may remember when I teach in webinars, we've always used $36 billion as the amount that the government gets from Social Security taxation. In this article, that was correct for 2020. Now they got the numbers in from last year. It's up to $45 billion. It went up almost $10 billion in 1 year because, again, we went up 6%, 5.9% in our Social Security payments coming in 2020. We've got all these increases are happening. The market had done well, so people had more money coming out. It's just going to continue to be a bigger and bigger problem. So anything we can do to get that tax off the table, great great resource and opportunity for us.
Yeah, definitely. Dave, I've got a few more questions coming in. Rick is joining us on Facebook Live and said, how and where do I purchase these I bonds?
Yeah, I was going to look at, I think it's Treasury Direct. I was going to try to type that into the chat panel here, but I think if you just search, yeah, it's treasurydirect.gov. If you'll just go to their website, you'll be able to get access to those. Again, it can all be done online. First $10,000 is basically bonds you can buy out of your checking savings account, whatever you link up to it. And then if you do have a $5,000 tax refund, you can get 5,000 of paper bonds by using that tax refund. I've never tried that. Gary or maybe others have. I've never tried that process, but can't imagine it being too difficult.
And Dave, let me pull up one more here from Gary on this, since we're in this topic still. Can an I bond be purchased with Roth IRA funds? And does a Roth IRA have a separate tax identification number, since any entity can be purchased up to $10,000 per identifying number?
That's a good question, Gary. In theory, I would think that if you have a self-directed Roth account, that would allow you to go purchase the items that you would put inside of there, I would think you could do that, but I can't guarantee that. I just don't know enough about it. And unfortunately, when we look at it, again, it's a hot topic. But $10,000 is, again, for a 1 or 2 year period of time, folks. I bonds, 3 years from now, we are not going to be talking about I bonds. They're going to be in the toilet because we're going to be in a deflationary period. So you're saying, hey, nobody's going to be buying these things. So to say, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time pushing them, getting people in there, and great $10,000 investment. Maybe it becomes $20,000 because you're able to buy them again next year, or maybe you bought them last year. But when we look at it from the overall benefits of your retirement plan, folks, you're not going to see a long-term benefit out of these I bonds.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much, and continue to submit your retirement questions, and we'll do our best to squeeze them in between all of these areas here. And it's been a great discussion on I bonds. So, Dave, thanks so much for taking these additional questions today. All right, let's get to my next one here. This one is from Nicholas. When is the best age to get life insurance?
What's your age today, Nicholas? Whatever that is, as long as you're not over age 70. Really, the sooner the better. Again, when we look at it, if you could buy those policies in your 20s, 30s, allow those to build up over time. Again, we're not just talking really, and really, as we get into retirement, maybe not even the death benefit. What we're talking about, tax-free growth, tax-free distribution, opportunity to use it for a chronic illness or a long-term care event. That what a great opportunity. We run illustrations for guys in their 20s, ladies in their 20s all the time. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars that can be built up in an environment where right now the market's down 20%. Your Roth just took a hit. Those accounts aren't taking hits. You're still at whatever you have invested in there. And as the market turns, we also know if you took a 20% loss, 20% gain isn't getting you back to where you started. Because instead of, let's say, you have $100,000 in there, you had 80, you get 20 of that back. Now you're at 96, not 100. You look at those losses, that's what really hurts us. These insurance products allow you, if you get the right ones, allow you to still have 100 grand. And then as the market goes back up 20%, now you're at 120. So you didn't have to take those big losses and those big hits. So again, I would recommend it for anyone as young as they possibly could, and before they end up having medical issues that may prevent them from doing it.
So, Dave, you said that, when it comes to buying life insurance, younger is better. But is there a crucial time to have life insurance?
Well, I think for all of us, it's all during our lifetime, really, if you look at it. Again, if you're in your working years and you've got a family, I've got 8 children. I obviously wanted life insurance during those working years in case something happened. So hopefully my family would be taken care of. Now, people choose not to do that, and their families have to put all the pieces together. But I would say, yes, you need insurance all the way through. And then into retirement, again, I own it and want it in my retirement so I can take advantage of the benefits it offers. Now, all that being said, folks, don't just go down to your local agent and buy a life insurance policy. These things need to meet certain criteria or it's not going to work out. It's going to be like a marriage or, situations that you've gotten into where you didn't do your homework and you thought you were getting one thing, and then you get it and you're like, oh, that's not going to work at all for me. There's no way this is going to provide me what I expected it to.
Dave, I look at this because we've talked a lot about making sure we get that life insurance young. And I think it has a significant economic impact on what we do. But I think it's like delaying saving for retirement. I feel like it has the same thing that people keep saying, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to get to it. And people are not taking action.
No, they're not. And what we've got to do, folks, is we've really got to match up our perception with reality. Is again, we look at these products, what they are, what they do. Talking to my sister the other day, and she told me she'd gotten scammed through a company. She had bought a shed to put a bunch of her stuff in. She just got divorced, had to move into a trailer, didn't have the space to put all of her stuff in. So she ends up getting scammed. And I'm sitting here thinking, here's a person, I've sent her some money to help her out. No, she doesn't have that much available. And I'm going, okay, that two, three, $4,000 that I didn't even know you had now is gone. How in the world did you allow that to happen? How did you get sucked in? Why didn't you just go down to the local shed company that's sitting right there in your neighborhood, pick up a shed? Well, again, all this is going through my mind. And then I finally said, okay, how much did you get taken for? It was $100. Well, I don't know even what kind of shed you're putting, $100 shed in. It's like, well, you got scammed day one. If you thought you could buy $100 shed, you can't buy shelves for the shed for $100. But again, it changed the whole situation, and this is happening in our lives. And we go buy an insurance policy and we think, oh, it's going to take care of all the things Dave talks about, and then you get into it, and it's like, no, folks, it's not even covering anything that we've talked about, and you're going to have problems maybe maintaining that policy. So it became a horrible investment for you.
And Dave, I've got a few more questions. I'm going to try to jump back over to our live one here to see if we could get a few of these. Rick was asking, does the I bond mature after 12 months?
Yeah, my understanding, yes. Gary, you may confirm that. Yeah, I know Gary knows a lot about these, that it could be at 6 months, but yes, it's not going to go beyond a year. Don't know if you can get a smaller period, but it is a 12-month window. You're not going beyond that.
And Dave, Gary's wondering, it's a kind of a big one, so let's see if I can get through. It has more than nine dimensions. But in light of the state of Washington's mandate for all employees to be covered under the state long-term care insurance plan, and in light of many other states considering the same, especially California, do you recommend that all employees secure their own private long-term care insurance coverage now rather than wait for California to impose its state mandated coverage?
Gary, I recommend that anyone, even if this were not happening, I would recommend anyone get a solution for long-term care. Again, when we look at the percentages of it, 35% chance we're going to have a long-term care issue. The biggest risk we have of anything we insure. You can take any insurance you've ever bought in your lifetime, excluding, I guess, life insurance. We are 100% guaranteed we're going to die, but most of you will lose your life insurance before you ever get there. But when we look at what people buy insurance for, and the majority of insurance is bought for auto and home, that's what most of it's sold for. Much lower percent chance you're going to have an issue than long-term care. Now, as we look at states making changes, history, if it repeats itself, which it generally does, yeah, we're way better off taking care of it ourselves than letting the government get in the middle and trying to put a product together to help us. Now, if we go, you can look at Obamacare, you can look at the market exchange, and some people are going to say, hey, well, there's an example of the government putting something in place that benefited us. Well, if you're getting all the credits out of it, absolutely. Yeah. But if you're someone who was paying for your insurance before, it didn't help you at all. The insurance that my family has now, 10 times worse than what I used to be able to pay for when I look back at my earlier years in my lifetime. So, yeah, I agree with you, Gary. We do need to stay ahead of the curve, but I would tell you, regardless of what states do, get that planning in place. Take the time now. So as this happens, you're already taken care of. You can check the box saying, hey, I've got coverage. I don't need to be buying the policies you guys are putting together. Because again, I don't know how this is going to work, Gary. You may know better than I do. But again, think about it. If you're in the state of Washington, you're having to buy all these policies, and then you move to Tennessee. What does that do? What happens to that policy? How's that going to interact? Where's that money going to go when you get into those retirement years? So just a lot of uncertainty that I think these states are going to have to deal with, and probably why they haven't been forced yet is they're trying to figure out themselves, how are we going to put all this together to where we can benefit everyone?
Dave, I was going to ask how you felt about this being mandated. I felt like that's something that you covered quite well, because I feel like that's something that, like you said, really takes away from us putting our effort in and getting the right policies.
Well, you need to understand that I am definitely a accountability and responsibility person. That, hey, if you've got something, you need to take care of it yourself. So from an overall standpoint of 2/3 of America using Medicaid to help pay for their long-term care event, which is putting a drag on the finances of every state that at some point everybody's going to end up having to pay for. Yeah, would I like to see us be mandated to have to get products that are going to take care of it? Yes, but when you look at the sheer cost of it, I get why most of America is not buying these policies. There's now many people who could afford to do it, but there's obviously many people that aren't going to be able to pay the $6, $8, $10,000 a year that these policies may end up costing them based upon their age and what they're looking for.
And Dave, Gary chimed in just to help give some clarification on those maturity for I bonds. It's 5 to 30 years. If the I bond is cashed out before 5 years, there's a 3-month interest early withdrawal penalty. The I bond is a 5-year hold.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gary, for the clarification. I appreciate that.
All right, Dave, let's jump back over. My next question I have here is from Nancy. What is the special enrollment period of Medicare?
Yeah, so when we look at the special enrollment period, it's basically the period where if you had creditable coverage before, meaning that you had employer-based insurance that the government said would qualify as creditable coverage, you then have an 8-month window once you either lose that or you lose your job, whichever comes first. And understand, COBRA insurance is not deemed credible insurance. So if you look at it and you said, hey, I was on my policy, I went to COBRA, but after I lost my job, 8 months starts when you lost that job. From that standpoint, you have 8 months to get signed up without penalty or gaps in coverage. So that's where the 8-month window comes in. I guess I shouldn't say gaps in coverage, because again, if you wait 8 months during that, you're not going to get the benefits until you get signed up. Medicare Part A can go back 6 months. Medicare Part B is not going to go retroactive. But
so, Dave, what if I miss my special enrollment period or my initial enrollment period? What can I do?
You're going to get into the guaranteed enrollment period, which could cause you to have a delay in coverage and could cause you to have a lifetime penalty. If you end up missing every year you miss Part B sign up that you should have been signed up, 10% penalty that you'll pay the rest of your lifetime. If you miss Part D, the prescription drug ends up being about 1% per month. Now, we look at that and say, okay, 12% per year, it's getting based on about a $30, $33.10 a month charge, I believe, when we look at it. So $3 or $4, it's not a huge annual fee that you're going to end up having to pay there, but still it's additional money you're going to have to pay out of pocket that you didn't need to.
And Dave, one more question that just came in. So what qualifies someone for the special enrollment period?
So you've got to have that credible coverage. Now, understand the big one everyone looks at is Part B, because you're talking $170.10 per month. Add 10% onto that, all of a sudden you're talking $17 a month that you're paying extra. That's going to add up during the year. So when we talk about credible coverage, though, understand Part D is different. So there are things like COBRA, if it's got a prescription drug plan. You could have other insurance, marketplace insurance, have had prescription drug plan that would qualify for creditable coverage for Part D in your prescriptions. But that's you're going to need to make sure you have those and understand what your insurance is. The best thing is to just ask your insurance how they interact with Medicare and what the laws are regarding there, so you can better understand the choices you need to make.
All right, Dave, we just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to pull up one more question, see if we can squeeze this in here before we go. This is from Randall. Can too high of a withdrawal rate deplete my retirement assets?
Absolutely. And this is one of the biggest things that is causing problems with retirees, not only from an annual standpoint. Again, if you look at it and say, okay, we set a lifestyle in place. And the biggest problem, though, when you get into retirement, if you think about the way most people plan for their retirement, I still find this super odd that society's gotten to this point. It's all based on a bucket of assets. Again, we're not looking at income so much, although we're trying to create income out of that bucket of assets, but we're not guaranteeing that income through there. So all of a sudden you're saying, okay, I've got $1 million going into retirement, maybe more money than you've ever had. That's your retirement bucket. Maybe your checking accounts barely had $1,000 in it each year. And you're saying, hey, I've got endless supplies of money. Therefore, one, I take too much out on an annual basis. But number two, what we see oftentimes is people blow that money on stupid stuff. I mean, it's the lottery example, only it's stretched out into our retirement. Someone wins the lottery, very few of them, if you go back after even 5 years, have anything left, because they all of a sudden think they're instant millionaires and that money's going to go forever. And so you go out and you buy the $100,000 car, you buy the $750,000 house. All of a sudden the tax bill comes, you're like, whoop, I owe 50 grand to the government that I didn't have of what's left. And I have the additional cost of the house. I have the additional cost of the car, and life just falls apart. This happens so many times in retirement. We just think, oh, it's going to last forever. And number three, CR, problem is we all think we're going to die earlier than we do. So we think we can spend that money faster. It's like, okay, yeah, your average retirement age from the government or life expectancy is 79. I retire at 69. I only got 10 years left. I can blow through this money and be just fine. If I got $1 million, 100 grand a year, I'm just fine. Well, then the market drops during that time. So instead of million, you got 750. Then you live 20 extra or, 20 years instead of 10. All of it's just creating major issues. So withdrawal rate's one of the biggest things people have to look at to figure out where they should be on the retirement.
And then Dave, in your webinar, you talk about William Bengen, who came up with that 4% rule. And has that changed, or is that still the same with inflation today?
Yeah, so most people are coming back saying, most advisors 2.5 to 3%. So it's actually come down from where it used to be. Now, surprisingly, William himself has come out and said, "Hey, I think it could be as high as 5.5." He's recently come out and said this, but again, you've got to have planning to figure that out. Yeah, we've got people that we do retirement planning for. They're getting 8%. Well, if you had a regular retirement portfolio inside of your traditional IRA account, 8% is ludicrous. You would never want to take an 8% distribution rate. But if you've got a situation where you've done the planning, you've got principal protected products, you've got the right asset mix in your portfolio, you've done all the things you need to do, your Social Security's at the levels that it needs to be, you may be able to get a much higher distribution rate than you even expected you could get.
And Dave, it looks like we're over time. I did want to let you know, Gary's still saying I'm waiting to treat both of you either to lunch or dinner at the Fisherman's Wharf there in San Francisco.
Man, I just wish it was easier for me to get there. If I could get out there in a day and back, we would have been there 6 months ago, but we've got to get this thing figured out.
Yeah. And Dave, it looks like E-Ring also from YouTube is jumping on saying that RMD funds do not need to be spent.
And that is true. Now, and ironically, most people look at it. It's one of the biggest questions I get in a webinar when we talk about a 3 or 4% distribution rate. The RMD requirement age 72 is 3.65 right now. So if you're talking at 3%, you've got 0.65 additional assets. Like, how do I match that up? Because most people are truly used to just spending whatever their RMD is. And it's like, well, you reinvest the 0.65%. But for most people, that means you're reinvesting it into a taxable bucket. It's throwing off all the planning you should have done to get where you needed to be. So, and this is why planning is so important. We don't even realize so many times when we look at our planning, again, standard financial plan is going to take us out through our retirement for many of you. But then you start putting all these risks in and all the things that really happen in people's retirement. All of a sudden, that retirement plan looked like it was going to 90, 95. All of a sudden, at 85, it's stressed. 80, it's getting stressed. You're not being able to pay the money that you need to pay. And this is why half of America is running out of money before they get done.
Dave, thank you so much. I know we are well over time, but we appreciate all the time you give us every week as we can come on and throw a bunch of retirement questions at you.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank all of those who submitted their questions with us live. Thank you so much. And if you did not get your question in, you were waiting, hesitating to submit that, go over to our website at retirementriskadvisors.com on the contact page and submit your retirement question there, and we'll get those on a future show. And again, if you are watching on replay and if you have the same questions, go ahead and put it over there. And again, thank you for your participation today. Dave, wow, that came and went so quick.
It did. It's like the weeks, everything just flies by anymore. So I feel like there's just a life fan that's just spinning everything as fast as it can right now. But I guess that's a good thing. If we're getting out, getting the stuff done that we need to, enjoying our lives, let that life cycle and enjoy it as long as we can.
And Dave, if people are just super excited and they're interested in all the things you're talking about, what can they do?
Yeah, go to our website, retirementriskadvisors.com. I recommend our flagship presentation, Getting Safely Through Retirement. This is where the rubber hits the road, folks. This is where you start realizing retirement's not looking like your traditional financial planner told you it was going to look like. This is where we talk about the risks, the challenges, and the solutions to get you through that longest self-imposed period of unemployment most of you will have in your lifetime. And it's really what we call retirement and something we want you to be able to enjoy.
And that is a 2-hour webinar that qualifies for 2 CPE credits if you need those as well. So I encourage you, again, go to the website to get information. Once again, Dave, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. We'll see you guys again next week.